present here. I, Dr.
Morning,
Ruchi
madam.
Malviya, on behalf of the Department of English, am here to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Sovan Chakravarti. Sir has been teaching as the assistant professor in the Department of English, Patna University. Sir, we feel honored that you consented to be a part of this program.
I'm honored
Dr.
too, madam.
Dr. Sovan is an assistant professor in the Department of English, Patna Science College, India. Prior to joining this post, he worked as a research scholar in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. In 2017, Sir was awarded the Dora Plus Visiting Doctoral Fellowship to the Department of Estonian and Comparative Folklore, Institute of Cultural Research and Arts, University of Tartu, Estonia, Europe. He has served as a faculty member in a couple of technical and general degree institutions, both private and public. He has a keen interest in the fields of folklore and oral narratives and has published a few research articles on Bengali folk ritual tales. Apart from that, his research interest and publication cover literatures of modern Indian modernity, Indian writing in English, and contemporary South Asian literatures. Some of his publications feature in internationally recognized journals indexed by the Web of Science, Arts and Humanities Citation Index, AHCI, and Emerging Resources Citation Index, ESCI, Scopus, and European Reference Index for the Humanities, and are published by such globally acknowledged publishers as Taylor and Francis, Routledge, John Benjamin's Publishing Company, Roman Books, London, among others. So we feel honored that you consented to be a part of this program. I once again welcome you, sir. I also welcome our colleagues and faculty members and our dear students also who are here to listen to you, sir. Once again, I invite you to speak on this subject, Marx and literature. So please just enlighten our students with your deliberation. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for this illustrious introduction of myself. I'm not that competent, I think so. And first of all, I feel humbled and honored to have been invited by the Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College, Prayagraj, Allahabad, for speaking on Marx and literature. Especially my thanks go to all the faculty members of the Department of English, apart from my colleagues from all other departments from the college, Dr. Ruchi Malviya, Dr. Ria Mukherjee have been very kind, to remember me on the occasion of this, the first day of Durga Puja, which is, coinciding with my talk on, Marxism and literature, or Marx and literature. So first of all, I thank all of you for inviting me to deliver this lecture. So to begin with, I think this is 11:37. Madam, can we continue till 1.5 hours or so?
Yes, sure, Dr. Shobha.
Okay.
No problem.
So my aim will be to conclude by 1 p.m. and maybe we can have a session 5-10 minutes of question and answer if you wish. So let us begin with my deliberation today. So see, on the screen you can see my presentation PPT, and this is about Marx, about literature, but this is also somebody is talking. Could you please mute yourself? Uh, some noise is coming. Somebody is unmuted.
Yes, actually, I'll mute.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Mansi Tripathi. हाँ, option नहीं आ रहा. I'm
I
not
have
the-
muted. I am muted here.
Okay.
I think you have now, put me as a host, so I could unmute.
Yes, you are a
him.
co-host. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I have muted. So anyhow, so this is my talk will be parallelly about Marx and literature and culture. So you see that when Dr. Mukherjee was talking about the superstructure, we all are aware that the superstructures are not watertight compartments. They are interconnected, and so culture cannot be completely extracted from literature and vice versa. So whenever we will be talking about literature, a culture will intervene. So Marxism and culture and literature, all of these will be these topics will be talking about or touching upon in today's lecture. So to begin with, let me uh, let me very briefly map the the schema of today's lecture. The first section is about Marx and Marxism, which will be slide number 3. Then there will be some basic concepts like dialectics, dialectical materialism, historical materialism, capital, commodity and value, alienation, base and superstructure. Superstructure, Dr. Mukherjee has already talked about. Ideology, class structure and conflict, communism and utopia. These are the basic concepts that I'll be talking about from slide number 4 to 12. Then, third part will be about aesthetic Marxism and overview. This will be, a kind of linkage between part 2 and part 4. Whereas part 4 will completely, totally be dedicated to aesthetic Marxism, and wherein we'll be talking about select theories or their or theorists or their theories from slide number 15 to 19, if time permits, of course. And then we'll be talking about some applications. I have taken popular texts as far as possible, like almost all of you will be just a second, just a second, please. All of you will must be aware of some basic texts like The Merchant of Venice, that is the play by William Shakespeare. Then The Necklace, this is a short story by Guy de Maupassant. And Crowds, it may be a little lesser known poem by Charles Baudelaire. The name of the poem is Crowds. So through all these different genres of literature, we'll be trying to look at how different strands of Marxist theories or frameworks could be applied to the superstructure called culture, especially in literature. So I have taken different genres because across the genres we will try to see how these concepts could be applied. So let's start with some basic concepts. Dr. Mukherjee, in her the introduction, was telling about how Marx is not only about literature and culture as we study him in our syllabi, but rather Marx is about basically about economics. Fine. So there where the significance of Marxist criticism starts. So we will start with some basic concepts that are related to the what we call the classical Marxism, that is basically the economic concepts, and then we'll be talking about some concepts which are significant in terms of culture and literature. So let's start with some basic concepts, and before that, there is one slide related to Karl Marx and Marxism. So let's start with that slide. So you can see here that Marx himself says that all I know is that I am not a Marxist. So when we talk about Marxism, we must understand that it is not Marx himself who kind of tried to publicize his contributions to the world of thinking as Marxism. Rather, the credit for calling Marxism as Marxism first goes to Gorky Plekhanov, fine, where he talks about when he talks about that talks about Marxism as an integral outlook. So it's basically first used, in recorded sense by Gorky Plekhanov, who used this word Marxism, but it was the effort made by Friedrich Engels, the lifelong companion of Marx, who was kind of very keen to develop to collect, first of all, to collect all the manuscripts written by Marx, and to publish them, and to develop them as a different or a set of approaches, we can say. So after that, Vladimir Lenin talked about Marxism, but then he basically gave the credit to some extent rightly, although the debates can be there, to Friedrich Engels for publicizing Marxism as Marxism, because Marx himself was never quite keen to publicize his thoughts, as a set of approaches that could be later on developed into proper theories and could be applied to starting from different fields, starting from economics to culture and literature. So it was, may I share an anecdote? I mean, Marx was a terrible, Marx's handwriting was terrible, fine. So even if I think Marx had attempted to publicize his thoughts, to be out of his capacity to do that until and unless Friedrich Engels published them. So there was an anecdote that there was a Prussian spy. Fine, there was this war, cold and hot, both wars going on between Prussia and Russia. So there was a Prussian spy who entered into Marx's house surreptitiously and tried to, look at and kind of collect Marx's manuscripts and papers, etc. But when he entered his house, he could see a huge pile of scattered papers that he couldn't gather at once in a small span of time, all of them. And then even if he could gather some, he couldn't make out what was written in them. So this was about Marx. He was not very organized. He was he was kind of, his handwriting was kind of very legible, so that people could easily understand his concepts. But it was, the credit goes to Friedrich Engels, who not only stayed with him or with his thoughts till his life ended in 1895, but also he took pain to collect those manuscripts all together and to publish them. So after Marx's death in 1883, Engels, as I talked about, wanted to present all of Marx's unpublished work to the world. So when it comes to the next generation leader like Vladimir Lenin, he marked out that there were three sources or component parts of Marxism. One is, the first is Marxist economics, as I already told you, or Dr. Mukherjee was mentioning. It was basically about economics. And then from that, offshoots began to develop, and dialectical materialism, historical materialism, all of these were developments made in later days. When Joseph Stalin came to power, he, I mean, gave all the credit to Engels too, for Marxism as a basic, concept or framework for, dialectical materialism. There was, a reason behind this as well, because Stalin was quite a good organizer. So he wanted to focus on Engels rather than Marx, because of his political ambitions. So when he gave credit to Engels rather than Marx for Marxism, we can see that he was aiming to organize Marxism as a party political stance as well. So he focused on Friedrich Engels as a systematic socialist, whereas he basically talked about Marx rather in terms of an intellectual who is a positive materialist and an economist, basically, who had less to do with the real politic, if we can say so. So now we are coming to basic concepts uh, like I'd like to start with dialectics. Fine. So this is a very a popular term as far as Marxist framework of conceptualization is concerned. But then we must understand a basic thing, that it was I mean the concept dialectics, or the term dialectics, that was not primarily associated with Marxism. Rather, it was associated with Hegel. Fine. So Marx borrowed this term from Hegel, and he acknowledges that that Hegel had deep influence on his thinking, at least at the primary stage. So you can see that I quoted, Marx in his Capital, that I openly avowed myself as the pupil of that mighty thinker Hegel. So from Hegel, Marx started his reason. How could Hegel, help Marx in his initial days of his thinking? There were two or three, things that could be associated, which we can say that Marx borrowed from Hegel. The first is logical conversation, dialectic as a logical conversation. Fine. So there will be conversation between two parties, but the conversation should be based on logic, not based on emotionalism. Fine. So that is the first thing. The second thing was, reason. So I mean, it's almost the same. So conversation based on reason, eleatic, as we call them. So in Aristotelian term. So and then the second thing is process or Ionian. Fine. So first is reason. The conversation must be based on reason, and the second will be progression or process. So there must be some progression through I mean, following which we can reach to some conclusion. So so when we see that, Hegel is talking about this progression, he talks about three components of a logical conversation or dialectics in his The Phenomenology of Spirit, which was published in 1807. He talked about the subjective spirit, that is the self, talked about objective spirit, which is nature. Now, these two are popularly known as thesis and antithesis. As far as my knowledge goes, these popular terms like thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, they were not original idea of Hegel, as shared in his different writings, especially the Phenomenology of Spirit, where he talked about the spirit, or consciousness or knowledge, not spirit as some ghost or something like that. So actually, when I first read about Hegel in my school days or high school days, I was thinking about Hegel, Hegel's spirit in terms of something Gothic. Fine, that Hegel was a philosopher, and most philosophers talked about abstract things. So we must be talking about ghosts and the relationship between human beings and ghosts and something like that. But when I realized, I read more about him and his concepts, and I could understand that it's not that ghostly spirit that he's talking about. I'm mentioning this because many of the students have this misconception about, or misconception or no conception, you can say, about what it might mean in Hegelian sense by spirit or Geist. Fine. So this is about consciousness or knowledge. This is about thinking. So our thinking process, our consciousness, that defines our consciousness, that when is compiled and organized and published, etc., and recorded, then that becomes knowledge. Fine. So when Hegel will be talking about spirit, he'll be talking about this thought process. Fine. This consciousness, this knowledge. So where will be this progression? Fine. So self and nature, that is, self is popularly known as thesis, nature is popularly known as antithesis. So self and nature, they will be, or thesis and antithesis, they will be talking with each other, and they will progress logically, reason based, in a reason based way to towards the synthesis, which is popularly known as synthesis, but actually mentioned by Hegel as absolute spirit, which is the total union of the two through art and religion. He has already given us, Hegel has given already given us a hint towards the superstructure, will Marx in later days will call as superstructure, art and religion. So Hegel was concerned with three things. One is progression, fine. Second is totality, wholesomeness, or reaching some conclusion. And third, very important, is sublation or aufheben in a German term. Fine. So this is both cancellation and preservation. So this is the magic, or you can say the central concept of dialectics, which was a new or novel way of thinking in those days, even in the days of Hegel. Uh, when he talks about sublation and unity, he does not cancel either subjective spirit or objective spirit, that is thesis, antithesis. Popularly, we know that when synthesis comes, then the thesis and antithesis, they are united in such a way that they lose their entities. But this is partially true because they do not lose their identities or entities altogether. They are preserved, but at the same time they are partially cancelled too. So they are partially cancelled and partially preserved. So this is what in Marxian term is called sublation. Fine. Or in even in Hegelian term will be called sublation. Fine. That is simultaneous cancellation and preservation. So all these things in Hegelian thought process was related to concepts, to thought process, to formula, to theory, to the realm of thinking. Fine. So Marx's objection, Marx took or retained exactly the spirit of in the spirit of sublation, some some of the concepts, that is partially preservation of Hegelian dialectics, like he stressed on reason, he stressed on process or the processual nature of dialectics, but what he can, and he retained sublation, the concept of sublation as well. But what he could not retain, or rather he cancelled or partially abolished or challenged, is that all these things were about the thought process, about the concepts, fine, about related to our faculty of brain or how we interpret things. But Marx challenged him on the basis that we live in a real world, we live in a society made of human beings, made of flesh and bones. We have a belly to feed. For that we need money. So only concepts and thinking or thought processes cannot feed us. So the concepts are there. They might be important, but they are only important when there will be some base of our existence, and that base is the reality. And reality, hardcore reality, is what Marx thought about, was based on economics. So he retained some of the Hegelian conceptions of dialectics, like reason, like the processual nature of that, for sure. He retained the the concept of sublation, but he challenged Hegel that, and he writes at the same time in capital. Here you can see the mystification which dialectic suffers in Hegel's hands by no means prevents him from being the first to present its general form of walking in a comprehensive and conscious manner. He is talking that Hegel was the first person to talk about dialectics in a systematic manner, but at the same time, mystification of dialectics is something that that it has it as a concept or applied formula had suffered in the hands of Hegel. Fine. So Marx, so Hegel was in a layman's terms was flying if we can say so, in flying in sky, and Marx brought dialectics to the ground. So so when Marx talks about what I talked about in just now in layman's term, he writes that in capital that with him it's standing on its head, it's just topsy-turvy, upside down. It must be inverted to discover the rational kernel within the mystical shell. So only and only with mystical, kind of an aura to dialectics, we cannot apply the concept, the framework, or the thinking process, whatever you call it, to the real life. So he inverted the whole Hegelian dialectics, and he rather tried to establish his dialectics starting from the material conditions of life and culture. Fine. And he pointed out that economics is and materiality are those the conditions, the basic conditions on which we could build the superstructure of culture, literature, religion, art, and other human cultural counterparts. So when he revised Hegelian dialectics, he brought into this world a communist worldview, and that is a body of theory taken to be true of concrete whole of reality. So he was also talking about unity, but unity not in terms of mystification or knowledge or thinking process, but a wholesome worldview of looking at the world in terms of the material conditions of a life and world. So this is why very often it's called that Marx was kind of an economic scientist, whereas Hegel was a philosopher, a philosopher come mystic. Fine. So Marx retained philosophy too, but he was kind of following the logic of science. That is, he talked about kind of a concrete form of natural philosophy. Fine. So and he connected this material conditions of human civilization and culture with history too. So from dialectical materialism, that is, material reality should be the basis, that is, economic reality should be the basis of everything, and it should be based on a concrete economic base. That was the not only the reversal but also a unique contribution of Marx to the unfortunately to the world of thinking too. I call it unfortunate because the whole effort of taking out philosophy from the kernel of mysticism was inverted, in later days, and once again Marx was accused of philosophizing. So anyhow, so it was in Hegelian dialectics, it was basically the primary thrust was basically on ideas, whereas he proposed that it was on the material reality that the dialectic should be based. So in Marx's hands, in it happens, or you can say with Marx's brain, it was happened that we moved from philosophy to materiality, or mystification to materiality, from quantity to quality too, because he did not, for the sake of wholesomeness, he did not, cancel altogether the contradictions. So the contradictions will live forever, and that is the contribution of a dialectical, basic thought of dialectical materialism. Fine, that there will be contradiction, and we must go through these contradictions in life, and but in material sense, not in ideal sense at all. Fine. So this conflict of opposites will drive the reality through history. So this is how history will evolve. So he proposed three laws of dialectic materialism. The first is transformation of quantity to quality. He said that it does not mean that when we are talking about materiality, we will be disconnecting humanity altogether from it. Humanity should be a prime concern too. So not only quantity, but from basing our thoughts on quantity, we must be able to retain the quality as well. And when he talked about quality, he was talking about humanistic qualities, as far as my perception goes. Then unity of opposites. There will be contradictions, and contradictions will be moved to next level through history, or through its processual nature, through time, to some unity. But in that unity, everything will not be cancelled, nor everything will be retained. Rather, there will be partial cancellation, partial retention, like Hegel proposed in Sublation. Fine, with the concept of sublation. And the third is negation of the negation. He said that since now what happened, that everything, starting from material conditions to the cultural conditions of human being, was controlled by what he would call in later days by bourgeois, or by people who have the controlling authority of everything because of different advantages they have, like they have money, they have social capital, that is, they have social establishment, they have established them socially. Then they have backup from the political status quo. So these people who will form bourgeois, Marxist bourgeois, they are now controlling everything. Although this world, this life, these resources, they belong to everybody. So the first negation was done by bourgeois, was that when they snatched the rights on of the common people, or everybody, on everything, to their in their own hands. So snatched them and took them, all the resources, in their own hands. So that was the negation. But he talked about the negation of negation. That is, he is now canceling what bourgeois negated. So he was once again coming back to the primordial idea of existence, that all the resources of the world belong primarily to everybody. And this is how he is negating the bourgeois negation of equally distributing wealth to everybody. Fine. So negation of the negation, that is where the third law of dialectical materialism uh, 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 lies. So from that, we now move to historical materialism. I have already talked about this, so I'll not be talking much about historical materialism. It's just links dialectical materialism with the conditions in the living history, that is time. So we live in space. The space provides us materiality, like like this computer, like you must be sitting in a hall or in a room. The college has provided you benches or desks, so they're the material spatial conditions provided to you. So we all live within this spatial condition, but at the same time, time flies as I lecture. So I am living on both of the parameters taken together. One is space, second is time. So when he is talking about spatiality, he is talking about materialism, dialectical materialism, the base, the need of basing the life on the materiality of our civilization. But here, when he is talking about time, he is linking this material existence with history. So he is talking about that materialistic conceptions of dialecticism that is not detached from history. Rather, history in simpler words, history or historical developments is also are also developed on the basis of dialectical materialisms. Basically, people have to go to war, fight. There would be bloodshed if one has to win a war. So this is the basic truth about warfare. And when you read about this establish of a new kingdom in history books, they will talk about the winners. Fine. So when you read about them in history books, that will be only conceptualizing the whole thing. But Marx is talking about the actual fight that was fought on ground. So not only about materiality, but historical development caused because of these material conditions, that people lost their lives, that people had to fight on some ground, that there was bloodshed. Fine. So empiricism basis will be on on data, on the conditions of materiality. Fine. Instead of the mysticism. So history is not about a progression of conceptualizing human civilization, but it's a progression at the base. It has, history has the material dimension to it. One has to fight on ground in order to win a battle. Not only not only writing history books will win somebody a war. So that is the difference between Hegelian dialecticism and Marxian dialecticism, and Marxist, the relationship of Marxist dialectics with history. Fine. So he is basing history with the social production system. So he is talking about a society living both in space and time. So space about when he's talking about space, it is about dialectical materialism. When he's talking about time, it is about historical materialism. And he is linking them to the production system, the relations of production. In simpler words, on how our material conditions are produced. One has to, cut wood from the forests, bring the wood to bring home the wood, then cut them into shapes in order to make some kind of give some structure, offer some structure to them, and then a table comes up, then a bed comes up. So this is the production process. And I mean, not in any thinking process or any dreaming process can make somebody lie on some bed, or can make somebody put some objects onto some table. But one has to produce that reality, the reality called a table, reality called spatial reality, obviously called bed. Fine. So, and this is not detached from society. Somebody in the society is doing that, and that somebody is linked to somebody else. Like right now I'm using this computer. I had to buy this gadget from the market. In the market, this computer was produced by somebody else. Its different parts was produced by different stakeholders. Then when I already bought it, I bought this software called Zoom, then I am able to talk to you. So when you are into a, when we all are into a social condition, you as students or maybe as listeners, you are also part of that. So social reality is has two dimensions. First, it is interconnected. Everybody is interconnected with another, everybody else. And the second is we have to produce the social reality. In the air, it's not produced in some air or airy fairy thinking process. Fine. So he is linking this production process with history, with time and space, both. So when we are talking about this production process, Marx is also talking about productive forces here. Uh, uh, could you see this this cursor moving? Can anybody give me some feedback whether you can see
Yes,
this
sure.
cursor moving? Okay, thank you. So when he's talking about production process, he's talking about production forces. He's talking about the, sorry, he's yes. So he's talking about the forces, means of production, the forces that create this social reality. Fine. So productive forces are means of production, like tools we used. We need to have a kind of cutter in order to cut a page. Fine. Then we'll have to have a machine in order to bind these pages together in order to convert it into a copy. Fine. There are factories, there are human labor as well, like human knowledge, human faculties, then human labor. So all of these things are means of production, and material means of production minded, and they are walking in time, in a given time. Like I am giving a lecture here, so it's time bound. Fine. I mean, not, I'm not talking about the limitation of time, but I'm performing this task in real time as well, in a real space. So I am producing knowledge, so I'm sharing my productive forces as a human being. So I need to have some tools like computer, like this software, like the internet connection. Then I need to have the support from factories where these computers are produced. where your institution is, I mean, the building of your institution has already been, I mean, the basic materials came from factories. So when he's talking about productive forces or production process, he's talking about, historical materiality, and the base is the economics, capital. So he will be using three very important, features of this production process. The first is capital. Why do you produce? Because the base of production is money, and the base of exchange is money too. Fine. So it was basically before the age of, the age of, this money tagging process. Fine. So this, everybody has sorry, everything has a price because it has a price tag. So this is a reality after the industrial revolution. But before that, when there was barter economy, when there was exchange of products among human beings in the human society, then labor was exchanged of labor. Like, I am teaching you, maybe one of your fathers produce paddy, so he will provide me with, grains. Maybe one of your one of the students father, he produces he is a blacksmith, so he will provide me with, the utensils. Fine. So in the barter economy, until and unless this price tagging system to the products arrived after the industrial revolution, it was, labor what was exchanged with labor. My labor I'm giving to you when I am, teaching you. Your labor in the form of products, your raw products, you are giving me back in the form of like grains, form of utensils. But when, uh, 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 this money economy arrived, then capital became everything. A base of the factory with the industrial revolution, factory became everything for our society, because everything was produced there or started producing there at least. Fine. Urban centers were coming up, so everything was becoming urbanistic, in the sense that villages, if not really turned into cities, they were influenced by cities and their models and their thought processes. So capital is taking place of the labor. Fine. So capital is what? Capital is an asset that can generate income for its owner. Capital is of no significance if you lose money in the production process. Like in a gamble, if you lose money, then you lose everything. But in a business, you cannot afford losing your money. Rather, your objective is just the opposite, to increase it, to generate extra income. Fine. So initial implications of capital was that capital exists in every society, and uh, income stream is generated from capital. In Marxist sense, fine, he says that when it came to capital in an industrial society, then the equal distribution of labor and capital, that was, disintegrated. So in every society, even if it exists with a few in the hands of a few people. Fine. So predomination of the capital lies with the capitalist society or the capitalist segment of the society, which is a characteristic of the industrial society. Fine. And capital is not only money in isolation, it's money that governs our social relations, that governs our production process. So money is, capital is not, in after the industrial revolution took place, it was not lying in isolation anymore. It was now linked to everything that we can call to be our material existence or to be our society or our culture, everything. So every sum of money is not capital, but capital must be able to transform, profit, and then only it will be called capital. The money that does not give you, profit to the capitalists, in terms of the capitalists, is not a capital at all. Money, 1 rupee coin is not a capital. A 1 rupee coin, if it is able to generate another 1 rupee coin out of it through the production process, then it will become a capital. And therefrom, beget the theories of commodity. Commodity is what? I talked about barter economy. I talked about exchange economy. That your father gave me something in exchange of my knowledge, some material thing. But later on, when capital, profit, money making, that motive started dominating the industrialist, with the industrialist class, then what happens? That everything became commodity. Commodity is not any material for that matter. Like every money is not a capital. Like every material is not a commodity. A commodity will only be that which will be able to be tagged itself with a price. So commodity is directly related to the not only the production process, but it should also be able to generate capital. That is, it will be profit making. And for profit making, the earlier value was use value. But then it became exchange value, and exchange value became money, or value in terms of money or price. In simpler words, when your father gave me back, the grains in exchange of my knowledge, there was no exchange of money involved in that. Both were materials, and both were produced with my own labor, with my blood, with my flesh. Fine. Everything was produced in that way, and a part of that labor I'm giving to somebody else in order to live in a society. But when capitalists came into the scene and they started profit as the main motive of their business, they started manipulating this process. They started using capital as price tags to things. Like nowadays we buy an utensil or a kg of rice with a price, in exchange of a price. So there becomes the importance of exchange value. But then became the then started the exploitation too. First, in earlier days, my knowledge was exchanged with your grains, but nowadays my knowledge is exchanged with a price, that is money, that is capital, and your grains is are exchanged with money too. The question is whether the price that is tagged to some object, can that be based on some rational process? Is that based on some rational process? Is there some rationality behind that? is it justifying the labor that is, that is there in behind the production of that particular object? So there he is talking about the abstraction of labor. Marx is talking about the abstraction of labor. The capitalist abstract make the value of objects abstract by initiating the money system or money tagging system in the exchange system as well, in the system of exchange. Fine, money tagging. So can a 10 rupee note be equal to a comb for that matter, or can maybe an LED bulb be equal to 100 rupees? So there is the question. So there must be profit when an LED bulb is sold in 100 rupees. Although maybe we often say that the production cost of the same LED bulb may not exceed 20-25 rupees. So there is that profit. So there is the implication of LED bulb being a commodity, and it is enabling itself into generating money. So money becomes capital. So there lies the value, but the problem lies in two fronts. First is, can they be equal? An LED bulb as a material identity or entity, and 100 rupees that is tagged as the price of it. We often say that the price is increasing, insanely. So here is the the significance of that. That there is no rational basis for increasing this value, or tagging this this money or price value to some object. So this is all about. So what happened that in this money making profit, in this is a money making business, what happened that, just a second, this money making process, so initial money has to be a surplus money. I mean the output, if the input is initial money, then the output must be surplus money. And initial money becomes productive capital, I mean capital for production, when it will be generating surplus money for the capitalist people. And then in the production process, you can see labor power is there, means of production, that is labor power means the labor who works, and means of production are the like tools and factories and etc. So there is the production process, commodity capital. Commodity means entities, material entities now becoming commodity because they are now able to generate capital, that is profit, and that this is surplus money. So what happened that now your father's labor and my labor as a teacher, your father's labor as a farmer, both have become abstracted. Both are being are being at least exchanged on the basis of money. So what happened that in the use value system, there was equivalency of labor. I shared something, you gave me something in material sense. But in exchange value system, what happened? There started abstraction of labor, which caused alienation of labor. Alienation is detachment. My हम लोग अक्सर बोलते हैं ना, we say it very often that खाली नौकरी के लिए नौकरी करते हैं, पैसे के लिए नौकरी करते हैं. So we give a labor, but we expect money out of it. So, and the dedication of the labor forces, that is not there as well in this money making profit making world. So what happens that the labor is detached from the product. and the arbitrary process through which price tagging is given to a product, that the output of that process is surplus value for capitalists. So there lies the basis, the economic basis for inequality in the society, and that starts the class war. So base is this economic system of production, and the superstructure is every other reality of the society which is based on this economic production system. So base is as I told you, the economic production system which are interrelated, and superstructure is culture which is nonetheless governed by this base. Ideology, he is also talking about ideology. We very often talk about ideology. So he is talking about ideology in a phase-wise manner. Fine. So the last phase is that ideology. The third phase is that ideology that is, dominated by the capitalist mode of production and circulation. So that is a sphere of pseudo-egalitarianism. Egalitarianism means equal opportunity to everybody, but this is advertised as something equal. Like, think of an ad of a soap. So the ad is given in such a way that everybody has the equal right to that soap as a product, but everybody is not actually able to buy that soap. If this is a simplistic example, think of something big. Fine, like maybe a big SUV car. Fine. So everybody cannot afford that car. When the car companies advertise about the car, then it will look like that everybody is feeling so happy with this new upcoming car. But in basic reality, everybody cannot afford this. So there is this advertisement which hides the basic material reality, the base. So the base is being hidden by the superstructure. So base is governing the superstructure. That is the basic concept of ideology, as Marx talked about in as being its third phase. Fine. So at the material bottom, the conditions of inequality and unfreedom prevailed. Fine. So he is then occupying himself with the class structure and conflict. So he is telling that if this is the base, if this is the basic condition of our society, if there is this clear distinction between two classes, haves and have-nots, then in this class structure, conflicts are due to happen, are will inevitably happen. Fine. So there are class means high class and mass means low class. These form two great classes, and the middle class is basically sandwiched between the two. So here he is talking about class structure and the conflict and the position of the middle class. Then he is proposing an idea of communism which will free this people, everybody, from this condition of unfreeness or injustice or inequality. And this is called communist utopia, because this will ever come or not. Even Marx was was kind of doubtful about that, but this was mainly propagated or politicized much more by the Marxist political establishments like Russian establishments, etc. in later days. So Marx was doubtful whether this will ever work, but he was only pointing out a framework of theories which could abolish this condition. And there, occurs this publication of this one of the greatest, what can I say, monographs of the world, that the Communist Manifesto came out in 1848. The spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. He is challenging the spectre of, because he has already talked about abstraction. If there is no concreteness, there is no human being, there is only ghost of those human beings, the counterpart, which are Gothic counterpart, which are not measurable. Fine. So when capital is haunting the Europe at the peak of the industrialization and capitalist system, he is challenging the European world, and he's talking about the specter of communism to bring back the days of equality and freedom. Fine. So he is talking about all these things. Now, how do all these concepts relate to, literary criticism or maybe cultural criticism? So aesthetic Marxism is all about how these concepts, economic concepts, can be applied to the aesthetics. Fine. Aesthetics means the conditions of superstructure, lying in the superstructure, that is culture, religion, literature, etc., etc. So the first I'll be talking about is adaptation of Communist Party ideology into literature, and which will be called party literature. And there are three main features of that. The literature must be party nosed, that author's commitment to the cause and line of the party. The literature must be kind of narrowed nosed. Fine. That is simplicity, it is realism. Fine. To resist alienation and eliticization. And the literature must be related to the cause of the class structure, that is classovast, the author's commitment to the class interest. So this is one way of adapting this class structure into the literature, and giving author the author only the credit of authorship if he or she is committed to this ideology, Communist Party ideology, which is a very kind of rigid kind of ideology in classical terms, we can say. Fine. So that literature, kind of literature later in later days will be called socialist literature in liberal terms, and agitprop in more party political terms. Fine. Like as told by Maxim Gorky. So agitprop is agitation of the proletariat, of the propaganda of the in the favor of the proletariats. So that will create propaganda and agitation to revolt. So that kind of literature will be called agitprop literature. So this is one way of taking it into literature. Then commitment to realism, that is another way to of looking at literature or adapting Marxism into literally using literature evolution as proposed by Georgi Lukács, you can say. So can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Can you still hear me? Okay, thank you. So this is another way of looking at how literature was adopted into the communist or the Marxist framework. So commitment of realism. We no more will talk about, or the authors will no more talk about spiritualism. Will no more talk about mysticism. or not only talk about philosophy, but talk about if that is kind of philosophy that will relate itself, correlate itself with the real conditions. So realism. So material, so the base of literature and culture should be the material social totality and not philosophizing it merely for the sake of philosophizing, not mysticizing it for the sake of spiritualizing it. So this is a kind of another way of adapting Marxist framework into literature. Brecht was differing with Lukács because Lukács was affiliated to the party, Communist Party. Brecht was also affiliated to communism, but as an ideologue, as kind of somebody who is ideologically aligned to the main to the main tenets of the of communism, but not a party cadre. Fine. So he was in the favor of non-realism. That is, he is talking about that literature, if becomes too much realistic, it will once again create a structure that will be parallel to that of the capitalist structure. When what he means by that is that if capital is encroaching on everything, if literature becomes too dictated by the party line or the literatures or the dictates of the party, then it will also start dictating the reality too. So there should be some distance between superstructure and base. So he is talking about epic theater, in which the artists on stage, they will not depicting reality in a hardcore manner. Rather, they will try which be which will be distanced from dominating ideology too. So in his epic theater, you can see that there will be time and again attempts to deviate audience from the reality that is being orchestrated on the stage. So your attention is time and again taken away by by intentional intrusion of unrelated things into a play. Like somebody will scream at once, somebody will come down in the middle of the audience, somebody will start smoking all of a sudden on stage, only to divert your attention. The logic is not to grapple your attention entirely, rather to divert it so that you are constantly aware of your own consciousness, your critical abilities. There will be no attempt to overcrowd or you can say to encroach completely your attention, your ability to think freely. So he Brecht, just on the opposite of Lukács, is in the favor of keeping the alienation effect. So other ways of adapting Marxist framework to literature are like the base and superstructure. So that becomes the basis for the structural Marxism as proposed by Althusser. Fine, in when he is talking about ideology and ideological state apparatuses, he is talking about two kinds of apparatuses. The first is state apparatuses, which are oppressive apparatuses like police, like army, which fight somebody's war on ground, material fights, fine. And there are ideological apparatuses like we the intellectuals, like the teachers who teach in schools and colleges, like the journalists, or the in both print and electronic media. So they do not directly fight on ground, but they indirectly do the same. So they are part of, ideological state apparatuses. So in this way, he is taking the concerns of basic Marxism into the analysis of culture and society. Fine. Then Frankfurt School people like Herbert Marcuse, Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Walter Benjamin, Jürgen Habermas, all of them are more or less talking about how capital is dominating everything, how capitalist class is dominating everything, how production process, industrial society is dominating every sphere of our existence. And they are very pessimistic, not very happy with the situation. So they are against this totalitarian regime. They're against this objectification and dehumanization of knowledge. So this is how Frankfurt School theorists, they talk about or adapt Marxist framework into literature. So this is very popular with culture studies and literature studies nowadays. This center margin diet, that base and superstructure, the class conflict, the conflict between haves and have-nots, have generated in the sphere of superstructures, that is culture, cultural counterparts, of very popular notions of the center and the margin, the dyads. So somebody at the center has everything and is controlling everything, whereas the people at margin, they are large in number, but they are always the losers. So this center margin dyad, they have been applied to different ways to the culture studies and literature studies. Like if we take the paradigm of women's position and rights in Marxist way, then it will generate the Marxist feminism, like in the case of Angela Davis, Simone de Beauvoir, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, etc. If we take the paradigm of colonialism and imperialism, Franz Fanon, Edward Said, Ranajit Guha, Dipesh Chakraborty will be talking about colonialism. When we take the paradigm of power and structure, there will be Michel Foucault. When we take the paradigm of spectrality, there will be Derrida talking about it in connection with culture. So you can see that this is how the Marxist literary criticism has entered through different avenues into the analysis of literature and culture. So I'm skipping, because of paucity of time, these parts which are basically related to how I mean their explanations of some of these strands, like he gave hegemony as talk proposed by Antonio Gramsci, and then how that was uh, uh, revised by several people. So hegemony, the concept of hegemony is there. Then ideology and ideological state apparatuses by Althusser. I already talked about repressive state apparatuses and ideological state apparatuses. Interpellation is a very important word, which is like the everything has become product. We also have become product, and we are interpelling means we are inviting everybody to buy ourselves. So we are making different schemes to buy ourselves, and we are inviting the people who are related to us in the society now, who have become buyers of ourselves. We are constantly inviting those people to buy ourselves. Fine. So this is called interpellation, invitation to buyers. We all have become products. Everybody else in the society have become consumers. So I talked in very brief about Frankfurt School too. Then the author is, this is Terry Eagleton, is talking about that the author has become in this production process a producer. So both Walter Benjamin and Bertolt Brecht, they are concerned with the position of author as a writer, fine, or the production of literature, in the process of production of literature, and where Benjamin talks about the connection between the produced and the producer, means the author. But Brecht is talking about the distancing of the author as the producer from the product, fine, in terms of epic theater. This I have discussed in very brief too. So this is India specific phenomena, subaltern history of India. This is another way of looking at Indian history from the base, from the perspective of the masses. So by Ranajit Guha and others, they have started in recent times. I mean, in the last 4-5 decades, a new way of looking at history, Indian history or historiography. Fine, that is subaltern history. Subaltern means who are in the margins in different forms. Fine, how they actually fought their struggles in the history, and how history could be written instead of big leaders, from the perspective of these people who actually fought in the time and space. So this is an Indian specific example of how historical studies accommodated Marxist framework into the analysis of culture. Now I will not give, because it's already one, I'll not give all examples. Rather, let me give one example, and very clear example. Fine. So I think most of you are familiar with this story called The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant. So what happens that in this story, somebody, I mean, the protagonist, the female protagonist, she is in the name is Mathilde. Mathilde is in need of beautiful jewelry in order to make herself presentable enough to attend a party given by a minister, a French minister at that point in time. So what happened that she could not afford to buy an ornament like that, so she borrowed a piece of jewelry from her friend, and after the ball or the party was over, she found that the piece of jewelry was lost. Then they came back, searched frantically for that, but that could not be found out. And what happened that they put everything they had at the stake, and they started working overtime. They shifted their home or their living place from a kind of a better apartment to a small living house kind of a place, a living room kind of a place. Mathilde was a very sophisticated lady, was at least she thought herself to be, but she became, after 10 years, when they could bought finally the very high priced piece of jewelry, diamond necklace, they found themselves to be with nothing. I mean, they were almost penniless. So Andrew Rowcroft says that this is not about only a story of borrowing a necklace and losing it, and then losing the valuable time of a life in repaying the debit for buying the piece of jewelry. It's not about as simple as that, but this shows how necklace as a commodity started dominating your life. At last, the Mathilde and her husband discovered that the necklace was only an imitation. It was not original, but they bought an original piece of jewelry and gave the original owner of that imitation the original one, the original piece of jewelry. But in the process of buying this original jewelry, piece of jewelry, they were left with nothing, almost nothing. They had to buy everything, they had to overwork, they had to lose many valuable assets of their life, etc., etc. So this is not only about about buying or borrowing and repaying the debt for a necklace, but rather this is about how necklace as a commodity could control the course of a lifetime and could even ruin lives. Fine. So Rowcroft writes that the story reveals the contradictions of the late 19th century French bourgeois society, acting as a scathing critic of social class and the monstrous power of capital and commodities to determine human existence. So Mathilde was a low-class lady. This is why her life got ruined, and also because her intention of buying this jewelry ruined her, because this was not only about a jewelry or a piece of jewelry. This was the power of capital and the commodity. So this is how Marxist criticism enters into a concrete example of analyzing the literature. I think I have crossed my limit. I mean, time limit. This is 1:06, and I'd like to conclude this lecture here because we do not have much time left now. So, Dr. Mukherjee, if you are there, could you please let me conclude my lecture?
Yes,
Dr.
thank
Mukherjee.
you, Dr. Shobhan. Thank you so much for this brilliant lecture. I don't think any book would also ever be able to provide us so much of information in such a short time. And I hope the students have understood the concepts that are associated with the Marxism, because now we'll have to do an Antonio Gramsci. So if you have any questions regarding any of the topics that have been covered today, students, you can ask. You can write down in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask, you can do that too. So it's up to you.
Yes, yes. So I'm humbled by your remarks, Dr. Mukherjee, I must say, and
it was
I'll
really
be
wonderful and a learning opportunity for me as well. Because I must tell you, students, because sir is kind of a, you can say, an expert on Marxism, And in fact, his PhD thesis has been an offshoot, and his areas of interest are also an offshoots of Marxism. So if you want, you can, if you want to ask any questions, you are free to do so.
Yeah, please. I'll be happy with questions if there are any.
Yes, Anamta, you are unmuting. You want to ask something?
If she wishes, so she can write in the chat box the question.
Yes, yes. Students,
But I think she is not able to unmute herself because it's in our hand to unmute her.
No. She can unmute herself actually.
So if you could unmute him.
And yes, everybody is unmuted. So if you people want to ask the
No,
question,
everybody is
you can
muted.
unmute and ask.
Everybody
Yes,
is muted.
but they can unmute. They have the control.
Okay.
Actually, yes. So students, if you have any doubts, you can please ask. I think it is to. Did you have anything to say, please?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
Students, if you have anything to say, you can please say.
Yes, anything. It
might also be a compliment, not a question.
It might not. No, it might also be a general inquiry kind of, or a comment, or maybe anything, any piece of query that you can come forward with.
Okay, I don't.
I mean, I'd like to know only one thing: if they have understood a little bit of the thing.
Yes, please. If you are listening to me, please write down. Yes.
Yes, there is one, comment.
Yes, one somebody.
So we can say that Marxist literature. This is Ashi Singh to everyone. So we can say that Marxist literature is influenced by class struggle, dialectic materialism. Yes, partially, and classically saying so. Basically, all these. I mean, at least the two. Concepts that you have chosen to make yourself understand about the application of Marxism into culture and literature, class struggle and dialectic materialism, they both are part of what we call classical Marxism, because you see in the case of, for example, Bertolt Brecht, he is not going with the concepts, or if I may say, the dicta of classical Marxism. He is not going with going with the idea of looking at everything from the perspective of the dominance of the proletariat classes, that is the labor classes. Then he is not going with the idea of dominating everything with the party line, etc., etc., at least as far as the superstructure, that is culture and literature, is concerned. But he is rather opposing it and in favor of retaining the alienation effect, that is the distance between the author and the piece of literature, or maybe the player and the audience. Fine, the play and the audience. Fine. So he is not going with the classical dicta of Marxism. So in one way, yes, you are right, that class struggle, dialectic materialism or dialectical materialism, they are part of classical concepts of classical Marxism, which applied actually in literature and culture in different forms. But I mean, the application of Marxism to literature and culture is not, with caution, limited to classical Marxism or the stands like class struggle, dialectical materialism, etc. Because there are other examples like given in case of Brecht. So I think this is the answer to this question. So this is partially true, like the concept of sublation. This is partially retaining Marxism, application of Marxism in literature, but partially cancelling this the concept too, because every application of Marxism to literature and culture is not following the classical norm. Some of them, for sure. Anything else?
I don't think there are any other questions.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
We have. Can you please explain again the concept of negation of negations? See, negation of negation. There are double negations. Dr. Mukherjee is an expert in feminism, fine. So, and Dalit writings. So in both of, in these areas, she knows quite well how doubly alienated, are the subjects, fine, Dalit and women. So I am referring to Dr. Mukherjee because she can give you this example of a double alienation of or double movement, because I think Dalit movement and feminist movement both are somehow or the other inspired by this class, as I told you, by this classical Marxist framework, this dyad of center margin thing. So madam will be, I'll request you to give them the analogy of this double alienation or double movement, fine, as far as Dalit is concerned, or as far as the position of women is concerned. Here is at the same time, I mean, like in the same spirit, negation of negation is talking about a double movement. Fine. First, there is something positive, we need to negate that, and there is that negation between becomes a positive thing, which will once again be cancelled or negated. So there are double movements here in the negation of negation. What was this positive thing that was negated by Hegel? The first negation. I'm talking about the first negation. Fine. Hegel talked about a society that would be dominated by what Marx later terms as the bourgeois classes, means the people who controls everything because they have power, because they have money, they have alignment with the people in power or the political status quo, etc. Fine. So they are dominating everything. So when we put the stress on thinking process, when we put the stress on knowledge production, as was done by Hegel, then we are elitizing the whole discourse. The whole elitizing means we are putting a few people in a position who will be called masters, and they'll be dominating the people who cannot think or who can think less. But this situation is something that must be negated. That must be negated. So the negation of this situation is called for by Marx. Negation of what situation? This complete domination by one class. That is, Marx will call this class as bourgeois class. So that negation is important, but it initially negated. I mean, the first negation is the negation of the principle of the primordial, ideal that everything should belong to everything, everybody. Everything should belong to everybody, because in this society, in this civilization, in this natural world, everybody has the same right to live and to enjoy the resources that is there on earth. Fine. So negation was, when one class dominates, the negation was of this principle that everybody is equal. So that is the first negation. But Marx is negating this dominance of one class. So there is the significance of the second negation. So the first negation is related to the primordial principle that of justice, of egalitarianism, of the principle of equality and equity. For example, like we have environmental activists nowadays. They talk about animal activists nowadays. They talk about the plunder made by the people in power or human beings, the anthropocentric discourses they are talking about. So this is also a negation of the primordial principle of an unified and equal natural ecology, wherein we are all part of it in the similar spirit and in the similar material condition. This has been negated by the bourgeois class. This is the significance of first negation. But in order to negate this dominance of the bourgeois class, we have to put another dominance in place. That is the dominance of the proletariat. So that is the second negation, the negation of the dominance of the bourgeois class by putting forward another force, oppositional force, the proletariat class. So this is the negation of that condition. So bourgeois had exploited the first course of life. They negated the first principle of equality. That must be negated. That was the negation done by bourgeois. And now this negation should be negated. And there should be an opposition to this absolute dominance. I hope I could make this clear. So the first was about the natural, equal, egalitarian condition, which was negated by the bourgeois. And this is the second negation. The first negation, the second negation is the negation of that in the condition of dominance, wherein we must oppose that dominance. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chakraborty. It was a wonderful lecture and I think beautiful explanations to all the doubts of our students. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the Department of English and on behalf of SS Khanna Girls Degree College, and of course, and on behalf of the other faculty members of this college for being here and for helping us making this program a huge success. Thank you so much for being here.
You're most welcome. I'm humbled by the invitation. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. So should I leave the meeting? Yeah.
Yes. I think
okay. Thank you.